What is up, everybody, and welcome back to episode 16 of From the Interns. We took a brief break to because nobody wants to hear us talk about Army versus Navy. That was
Right.
quite the game, but we're here now. We spent our Christmases, with family and everything. So Merry Christmas, everyone. It is a day after, but figured we'd hop on a Zoom and get to talking about the dogs, talk about college football before this big Thursday slate we've got coming up. Obviously, a lot of other big bowl games coming up, but the ones that make the money are coming very soon.
Yep, it's we saw a couple games in the first round that were pretty good games. A lot of surprises, whether it was just a lot of or lack of offense rather, and just starts from teams, and just there were some good games. Really, first thing that stood out to me was just Alabama's big comeback over Oklahoma. I thought that the way it was starting out, it just seemed like it was going to be a continuation of how Alabama played in the SEC championship, where it's not really being able to move the ball, not able to run the ball, and then it's just like on the flip of a switch. Next thing you know, Alabama scores. It was 24 or 7 something unanswered points and just completely ran away with the game. So it was just it was very impressive what they were able to do, and it's going to be interesting to see what they'll do against Indiana coming down the road on New Year's Day.
Yeah, it was. I mean, that game was just ridiculous. Exactly like you said, you're sitting there, 17 nothing. You're like, I mean, this team is just getting dismantled, and it looks like it just fully carried over from the SEC championship. And then, exactly like you said, Alabama scores. They tie it up by halftime. They get a Mateer throws a pick six, and that's just the stuff that you can't let happen. And I think one of the coolest things about that game to me was just the atmosphere that a home playoff game provided in Norman, and just how much desire you can have. I don't think obviously this year it's not happening for Georgia, and I personally don't think it's going to happen next year either with the seeding. But just it makes you want to slightly wish you were on that lower seeding so you could host a home playoff game in Athens, just because of how I mean, that's going to be the craziest environment you're ever going to have uh, in a home stadium in college football. But huge one for them. Ty Simpson's all, oh, they doubted us. You guys doubted us this whole time. And it didn't even feel like as much of an Alabama figuring it out and winning on offense. It more so felt like they just stepped it up on defense and were able to capitalize off of Oklahoma's mistakes. I mean, you've got a punter that literally just drops the ball, and Alabama blocks it and comes away with a short field. And all along, as soon as they score that first one, you could feel that shift for sure. And then obviously next big game. Unfortunately, it was the noon game because you've got college football competing with NFL later on that Saturday. But the Miami A&M game was just a dominant defensive performance on both sides, and you got 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Field goals are flying left and right, not going through. And then Miami's just finally able to find the end zone there. They've got, I mean, Fletcher and Tony are just different. And those dudes are, it's a true freshman and a true sophomore, and commanded by a guy who's got so much experience like Carson Beck, who is somehow starting his first playoff game. That's the first one he's started, which watching the sport for this many years, you would think he would have at least seen the field and started in a playoff game. He's seen the field, but you'd think he would have started one by now. And for them to come away, their defense is incredible.
Yeah, their defense played well, and you just when you think about how they have to play Ohio State next, it kind of feeds into that because most of Ohio State's bigger games this year have been low scoring. So that would make you think that Miami's going to have a good chance to stay in that thing because it's going to be a another 20-13 game, which results in Carson Beck really not having to do that much, which he didn't have to do that much against
Mhm.
Texas A&M. with the way that their game plan was, and just, I think the wind had a lot of big factors during that game that a lot of people didn't realize. And it was kind of funny because I feel like the kid that did the $1 million kick on game day might feel a little bit better about himself the way that the field goals were going in that one. But yeah, that was just one of those things. And it's the playoffs. You just got to win. It doesn't matter what it looks like. There's no more rankings. The only thing that matters is just moving on. So Miami was able to do what they needed to do. And, it might not have looked pretty. There might be people saying that Ohio State's going to run away with it, but, that it's going to fit right into their game plan if they just do the same thing and just run the ball and get it to Tony out wide quick and stuff like that. So, we could see another 10-3 game in the Cotton Bowl. So it could be interesting.
Yeah, and you said it. I mean, the way it doesn't matter how you're winning these games, and that's why I was looking at this Tulane Ole Miss game and this Oregon JMU game, and JMU made it closer and was more in it than Tulane ever was. But I'm sitting there asking my dad, like, why? What are these coaches doing, keeping these starters in the game? Why is Chambliss in the game? Why are all these guys in? And you've got an Ole Miss running back who gets hurt. You've got Chambliss goes down, and you're like, I mean, why? You have complete and total control of this game. Tulane played a pretty solid game and still lost by 30 points, and it just makes you question, what are you trying to accomplish? Because this Miami game, like you said, they won. It doesn't matter how you win; you can win by 1 point, and you're advancing. So that's just the state of how it is and what matters. And also, I think if you're Ohio State, this is a team that rather you would much rather face that A&M team, I believe, if you're Ohio State than this Miami team,
Yes.
because this is a team, both are extremely talented, but it's just the whole aspect of Miami has a great defense, which Ohio State has struggled with this season when they've played those. And they've got playmakers who can keep them in it. And I mean, if this game is held to under 30, 37 or so points, I think Miami is definitely in it. And that's why I'm so surprised that the spread is as wide as it is, just because 9.5, I mean, that is a lot of points to, to win by against this defense for an Ohio State team that just put up 10 against Indiana.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't want to sit here and say that, Ohio State's not any good. I mean, they were the number
Yeah,
one team in
yeah.
the country for the majority of the year. I get what you're saying, but it's like, which is maybe why the spread is so high playing the 10 seed. But I mean, it's just like you're saying. I mean, it just this is a team that, and also Miami can be explosive on offense when they want to. There's plenty of games this year where they've put up over 40 points. So if they get in a rhythm on offense, which I think what you were kind of saying, they'd rather see Texas A&M, because I feel like Miami has more of a capability to get in a really good offensive rhythm than Texas A&M does, which is there's more of that possibility, which I think could very well happen. Um, with just Miami being able to run the ball, if they can establish the run, open up some throwing lanes for Beck, especially it being this game being indoors, which again, like I'm saying, I really think that wind had a lot of factors that people don't really realize, because you saw, you know, Beck's throwing a deep ball, the guy's wide open and he misses it by 5 yards. And it's like maybe it could have been a bad throw, but it also could have been, a 25-mile-an-hour wind gust come through that just disrupts the throw. So there's a lot of different things you could look at, whether or not the wind completely messed up some of those throws or not, but it's still something that, you know, we might not know, that some of the players are like, yeah, I saw that ball drifting away. So it's one of those things, this game being indoors, indoor games have a lot better capability to be a little bit more high scoring. So we could also see that if Miami can get going on offense and force Ohio State and Sand to maybe have to do some things offensively to get past the Miami defense.
Yeah, it's an exciting next round, and as a fan of Georgia, I think most Georgia fans probably want Miami to win this one. I'm on the train where, give me Bama all the way, give me Miami in the next round if Georgia advances, and just let them play through Beck and let them play through Bama again, and just win it all the way that way. And of course, there's a lot to go on there, but I think we should talk about just inclusion of Group 5 teams and how this fully disrupted. I mean, everyone for the most part expected it to happen, but it actually did happen, and both of these teams got pretty dismantled. Like I said, JMU was more in it than Tulane was, but when you have a Tulane team that puts up, I want to say they had 300, 400 yards and still lost this game by 30 points. This is just it's just sad for those teams because of how successful their seasons have been, all the way to just go into this and just get dismantled by a team that is significantly better than them. These teams aren't going to be competitive throughout the stretch. They never were, and it's not a knock on them. It's just the reality. And it's time to sort of sit back, evaluate the format, and say, okay, would Vanderbilt have put up a better fight? Yes. Would Texas have put up a better fight? Yes. Would Notre Dame have put up a better fight? A team that had the fourth best odds to win the Natty before they didn't make the cut. Yes, they would have, and it would have provided two more games that more people would have tuned into. I saw the broadcast stats the other day were posted, and it was, I think Miami versus A&M had like three or four times the amount of viewership throughout those games, and it's just sad when you could have those teams go play either their own tournament, um, or just play a fun, a high up bowl game against a team that would be a competitive game, but instead they're sitting at home now and, sort of wallowing in the fact maybe that they could have been a Cinderella story. But like we've heard all week or two since, this game, is these Cinderella stories don't work. They're not real in football. That's a basketball thing. Teams can get hot in basketball. These 22 guys that have to line up on offense and defense just aren't, it's just not compatible, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, a couple things here, but one of the biggest things for me is you think back to Cincinnati when they made the playoff. Well, first of all, I think they might have earned their spot. They might have earned it. They went undefeated. They played some good opponents, and I don't remember what conference they were in, maybe the American at the time. But
Mm-hmm.
they played some high level competition. They won some big games, and they had their chance at the playoff. I think that might have been the college football playoffs way of maybe experimenting with that a little bit, knowing the route that might have been going on, where they were going to add group of fives. But anyways, and it's just one of those things where you just look at Tulane and they had a couple losses at the time. And it just seems like they didn't really earn their spot in there. It just seems like because there was that group of five spot, they were going to get it. And I just feel like when you do that, you're not putting the best 12 football teams in there, which I think is ultimately what you need to do. And what you need to do is you need to go tell the schools like James Madison and Tulane, we would love to have you in the college football playoff, but you got to earn it. So go schedule non conference games against Michigan and Texas and prove your worth because you should be able to have to go into other schools, tough environments, and play these games. I think someone was talking about how James Madison, I think it was the Duke coach after they won the ACC, was like they haven't beat a big team all season. Their best win was probably Georgia Southern or something. To be honest, I mean they don't have any games on their schedule that pose any threat. That's why they go undefeated and win their conference because they don't have anybody on their schedule that as it plays the football at a high level. And then one other thing, it's kind of another way of looking at it is the way college football is now, where nobody's ever satisfied where they're at, including coaches. These schools that are going to be making the playoffs are going to have coaches that are going to be leaving for other schools, and you're going to continue to see this where Tulane's coach is going to go on to Florida, and then James Madison's coach is going to go on to I forget where it is, maybe Oklahoma State or something like that. But you're just going to continue to see these teams with players who have coaches that are leaving, and I feel like if you're leaving a program, you're just not resonating as well with your players. And you can kind of even see it in the pressers with these coaches where they're kind of smiling and stuff because, it's, oh, our team made it. That's cool. But I don't really care. I'm going to Florida. Obviously, Summerall probably cares about his Tulane team. He definitely wanted to win the game. But you just don't resonate as well with your players, I think, when you know that you're leaving and your team's already facing a tough task to have to go into Oxford or Eugene, wherever it is, and just win a big game that you really just have no chance of winning. So I think in the future that you're going to have to earn your playoff spot if they want it to be right.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. Like I am all for these teams making it, and exactly like you said, if they earn it, if they go 12-0, have a non-conference game that's against a legitimate opponent and they win or even put up a fight, go 11-1 and put up a fight against, let's say, Oregon in the regular season. I'm all for that, and it's just the matter of Cinderella story versus a team in a lesser conference that's able to compete with teams in these Power Four conferences. And yeah, like you said, the coaching carousel has been insane this season in particular. It feels like the standard is sort of rising, and when like exactly like you said, when these coaches are already on to the next, it becomes a distraction and it becomes something where it's just tough for these teams to truly be focused when in reality it's going to continue to happen. That's where these coaches typically are poached from are these lower teams or coordinator positions at one of the top teams in the nation. That's just how it rolls. But it's unfortunate to see. I don't remember who it was, but on a show just talking about just give them their own tournament, let them compete for a group of five natty, and then you're making just as much or you're making more revenue off of these teams anyway. So I don't see why that's not something that can be introduced. And I think it would be fun just because I mean it's more games in general, and it might not be as high of a title, but you're putting these teams in competitive positions. So I think that's a good idea personally.
Yeah, that's another thing. You just kind of this time of year, you're always really looking for a lot of good football games, and that is, is it's completely different levels of football. I mean, just the size of the athletes. I've always talked about the trenches. I mean, these teams are running all over them. They're getting 7 yards a carry because their offensive line is just completely dismantling their defensive line because they're just bigger, stronger athletes. So it's a different level of football. James Madison, yeah, they might have put up 30 something points. That's cool and all, but they were never going to win that game. It was just, in my opinion, I think it's a disservice to football when you look at the slate and, you got these great games on paper, and then two of the games, the spread's over 3 touchdowns. And it's like, what are we really doing here? Does that really show that the 12 best teams are in the playoff? It definitely does not show that. So, it's going to be something that they're going to have to be forced to evaluate because I think that 99% of college football fans were definitely not satisfied with the, you know, level of football they were seeing out there on the field on that afternoon following the Miami Texas A&M game. So it'll just be another thing that we're just going to have to continue to watch over the offseason,
Yeah,
especially as they haven't they even talked about maybe like a 16 team playoff. I mean,
yes,
there's every
yes,
year.
they
Yeah.
have.
So
So, I mean, it got to the point where I'm at my family Christmas reunion on Saturday of these games, and everyone's locked in for Texas A&M Miami. Everybody's watching that, and then you're sitting there with this Tulane Ole Miss game on. Ole Miss scores in the first minute, and you kind of just write off both those games. And with all due respect to those programs, everything we've been saying is exactly why people have that mindset is, I mean, these teams just simply aren't going to win. We can watch and see how much of a fight they're going to put up and see sort of watch Ole Miss and watch Oregon and see who their guys are if you haven't been watching them much this season. But it's at the point where you're just throwing that one off to the sort of back of your mind when you're especially in this holiday time, you're not going to be fading time with family to watch a beat down.
it's also, I mean, I think it was a couple years ago, Tulane beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. I think it was in a neutral site, but you're what's funny is you're also asking these teams to go on the road in a night game in James
Mm,
Madison's case. I mean, that's just never gonna happen.
yep.
I heard so many people say like this is a game you should be seeing in September 1st, not December whatever it was. It's just it shouldn't be that way. It should be, Notre Dame having to go to Oregon and everybody getting fired up about that one versus a team where people don't even know where the school's from, state-wise, probably for the most
Yeah.
case. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really a shame, but it is good to maybe see some different representation in the playoff. But you just think back to Cincinnati's case, maybe go earn it, maybe go beat a Texas Tech on the road early on in the season. Like schedule these games where you're having to go earn it. But in their case, why would they schedule it? Because they know that that spot's there for them. So it's not really their fault. So until the college football playoff changes up the rules, you're going to continue to see 13-0 James Madison, whose best win is Georgia State. So it's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
yeah, it is. And with all that being said, let's talk about what's on everyone's mind for this next week. What game is in 6 days? And that is the old Georgia versus Ole Miss rematch. We've been talking about it. I don't know what is up in my gut, but I've got this feeling, and it's not a good feeling. And the gut normally tends to be relatively right. I'm hoping this one is just a smoke grenade, and it's my brain's just fogged or something. But something's up. I got a weird feeling about this game. I saw Josh Pate put out a tweet a couple of hours ago that said this is the Georgia spread is by far the favorite. Or most placed online of the next round of the playoff. And that again is just like, all right, that's scary to see. Vegas would win if Georgia does not cover. So maybe Georgia wins and Vegas wins, but that just scares me. We've got it written down. It was Sugar Bowl last year. Gunnar Stockton's first real start in football. Had himself a decent game against Notre Dame, but had that middle eight that was just rough for Georgia last year. Had a lot of distractions too. Coach Smart's father passed away, I want to say the day before. There was a terrorist attack in New Orleans the night of New Year's. And not to say that those are, full excuses, but it was just it was a game where you walk away losing that and you can't be upset because of the circumstance that your team is in by any means. And now you have a chance to go back there, prove yourselves. Georgia loves the Sugar Bowl, rich history in the Sugar Bowl, and it's an Ole Miss team that just put up 40 points in the first round of the playoff.
Yeah, like you just said, it just feels like, at this stage of where Georgia's program is, every year it's going to be headed to the Sugar Bowl, um, as long as, they keep playing well. But yeah, this is also an Ole Miss team that Georgia's already beaten, right? We all saw that game. It looked like Georgia was going to lose. One of those games where we kept talking about, it was like five in a row where Georgia's down in the fourth quarter and then somehow wins the game. It was similar there. I think Ole Miss had like an 8 point lead or something with
Mm-hmm.
like 3 minutes to go, something like that. But yeah, it was a great game in Athens, great comeback win. Gunnar Stockton had a huge day that day. The really biggest thing when I just think back on that is I feel like Georgia's gotten a lot better since that. Every Kirby Smart's always talking about how these guys are growing, and he's talking about how he looks at these freshmen now as sophomores, stuff like that. Like all these guys who have gotten so much experience in these big games, and Georgia's already beat them, and I just think they've gotten a lot better since then. So I think Georgia should see we should see a lot of the similar things we've been seeing the last couple weeks with a lot of the run game, a lot of the, keeping it simple, just, winning in the trenches because I think Georgia's definitely better in the trenches and they don't really have to do anything that crazy. But so just I would expect a lot of run game. But we'll have to see how it goes. Nate Frazier big day could be something that everybody would be pretty satisfied with, but we'll just have to see how it goes.
Yeah, and you said it. These freshmen are pretty much sophomores now. I mean, looking at it, the way recruiting goes is these guys come in bowl season last year. They graduate high school early. They're here 6 months before they should be. 7 months before they should be, and so they have been with the program for a year. So they technically, in old terms, would be sophomores if that's how if they came on time. And it's just been so evident how much the defensive side, especially, has improved. And like you said, trenches, it's just, it's going to be a game where Georgia tries to slow it down, tries to control time of possession, keep Ole Miss just, they're going to try to run fast, try to keep them off the field as much as possible. And like you said, I think this is a day for Georgia running backs to be back. Chauncey Bones is probably going to be closer to 100%. Um, and Nate Frazier's getting healthier. All these are all guys that have been dealing with just nagging injuries. Even I know Frazier's been, there and available for the most part, but he has not been. You can see in the way he played in some of our more recent games, and you can see how he has been impacted. And then back to injuries, you've got rumors that Ethan Barbour is going to be back, the freshman tight end that broke his ankle early in the season. Colby Young, with true journalistic research, posted a TikTok without his boot on. We also both saw him without his boot on firsthand on campus. So take that for what it's worth. But I think this is going to be a thing where he's possibly going to be in this Ole Miss game, and if Georgia advances, I think Colby Young, it is safe to say, will be back for either Ohio State or Miami. And that's just a dude that, I mean, Georgia's got the weapons, but that's just a contributor to the team, and that's all you can ask for is guys like that to be back. Gabe Harris probably not going to be playing against Ole Miss. Drew Bobo not going to be playing. And so you're still dealing with these injuries, but it's at the point where Georgia dismantled this Alabama team without most of those guys, and it's just, why not? That's sort of the mentality it feels like this Georgia team has. Is just sort of a, why can't we win this? And like you said, there were probably 5 games during the season where Georgia's down in the fourth quarter, and it's just back to that mentality. Is, why not? I mean, we can win this. We've done it before. We had one of the most clutch Georgia throws on 4th and 6 in Neyland that this program has seen by Gunnar Stockton. And like you said, he had a good day against them last year. I think he had, I want to say, 4 or 5 touchdowns. And Lawson Lucky had 3. So this is just, it's a team that Georgia's beat before. It's a team they obviously can beat again. But the part that scares me is the whole, all right, our coach left us. We have nothing to lose. We're playing for our new coach in Pete Golding. And what kind of impact is that going to have on them? And that's sort of what I look into.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned it because Georgia's had this case a couple times. In recent memories, playing for an interim coach. I know Golding's not interim, but it just kind of gives you a little bit of fire, at least there for the early portions of it. Which this will only be the second game of his tenure at Ole Miss, but yeah, it's gonna be a really good football game. Kind of what you're talking about, that gut feeling. This is one of those. It really would not surprise me if Ole Miss kind of comes out a little bit hotter than Georgia, kind of like we've seen earlier in the year. It really wouldn't surprise me if they even score first, which would not be ideal. But Georgia's been able to rally from that plenty of times. But yeah, I mean, I also think there's a decent chance that there could be more Ole Miss fans there than Georgia fans. I mean, if you just think about what this means for Ole Miss, I mean, I think I told my brother this, it was last week, that I mean, even though they're playing Tulane, that was probably the biggest game in Ole Miss football history that if you think about it, they'd never been to the playoff. Maybe I'm wrong there. Have they ever been to the
I
playoff?
don't think they hadn't
Yeah.
been to at least
So,
the recent playoff.
yeah, it's just, they haven't probably won a national title in most Ole Miss fans' lifetime. So it's just one of those things where it doesn't really matter very much the opponent, but just the fact that they're in the playoff and it was in Oxford, that place was rocking. And, New Orleans isn't a far drive from Oxford, so it really wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot of Ole Miss representation there, getting ready for that game, just considering, if they win this one, they keep moving on in the playoff and they can have a shot at a national title, which they really haven't been able to say for a long time.
A very
So
long time.
it's I think they're going to be playing with a lot of energy. I'm not saying that I think Ole Miss is going to win the game. I do think Georgia will win, but Georgia needs to be careful, and Georgia fans need to be careful writing off this Ole Miss team because, like you said, they're playing with nothing to lose. Their program is at an all-time high, even without Kiffin, and I think their fans are pretty confident. I mean, I've heard a lot of chatter from a lot of different people that these Ole Miss fans think that they're going to beat Georgia. So oh, it's hard to beat the same team twice. Whatever, I've heard that a million times, but it's gonna be a really good football game. I think Georgia has what they need to do to win, but I'd be real careful, talking about already getting ahead and talking about the Fiesta Bowl because this game is not going to be, this blowout that some people might think. I think, Georgia's the SEC champ, sure, but that doesn't matter once they get in between those lines. So,
it goes back to what we said: is you just got to win. It doesn't matter if it's a point. It doesn't matter if they cover. If Georgia covers, it's just all about having your score be at least 1 point higher at the end of the when the clock strikes zero. And that's a very good point. I mean, Ole Miss is significant. Oxford is significantly closer than um, than Athens and Georgia is to New Orleans. So that'll be interesting to see. I do think that is something that is maybe a little underrated, that we could see a nice 60-40 kind of split in that game.
Which Georgia fans are not used to. That's for sure. So
Yeah, no, absolutely not. And I think with that, let's do a quick, I guess, score prediction. I'm gonna go fully off of what Vegas thinks is gonna happen. I think the over under is around 56.5. So I'm gonna say that Georgia wins this game 31-27.
I'll say 27, 20, 27-21. Just thinking top of my head. But yeah, like I'm saying, Ole Miss has this really good offense, but I think the Georgia defense is really going to step up. Like I said, I think Ole Miss might get out to a little bit of a fast start, maybe put up a quick 7 there. But at the end of the day, I just you go back and look at that Tulane game. They gave up over 400 yards to a Tulane offense that didn't really look that great, but on paper, 400 yards is 400 yards. That's a good offensive day. And Ole Miss also had some slower moments on offense. Their running back might be injured or pretty banged up. I
He was
guarantee
definitely
you
banged up. Yeah,
he's going to play. I'm sure they're going to, make sure that he's in that game. But, he had 2 touchdowns last time they played Georgia. And if he's, not 100%, that could kind of slow down their ability to run the ball and, stick to the pass game, which Georgia's been pretty good at recently. So, yeah, I mean, I think Georgia will take care of business and they'll be able to, slow it down, keep it from being what it was last time. Where I don't remember what this final score was in Athens, but it was pretty high if I
it
remember
was very
correctly.
yeah, it was high.
I don't really expect that again. I expect a big run game from Frazier, maybe Bowens if he gets in there a little bit, but I really think that Georgia will keep it pretty much what we've seen, like we saw in the Tech and Alabama games, just strong run game, take care of business.
I agree. I like it. With that, we'll get into our unlocks of the week, our section where we provide our thoughts on spreads, but are typically pretty wrong. I'll start us off with let's see, what do we have going? I have it written down. Give me just a second. The Valero Alamo Bowl. Josh Hoover transferring away from TCU, um, starting a backup quarterback. I'll take that any day of the week. Give me USC minus 6.5 over TCU. That's on Tuesday, December 30th at 9 p.m. And then I'm going Miami plus 9.5. I know we talked about it in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State on Wednesday, but I just think that this Miami defense is at least talented enough to keep this within a one score game, maybe 8 points. But I think 9.5 is just a little bit um, optimistic of a spread. And I could totally eat my words here, and Ohio State could win by 24. But I just think that here's what I'll say. If Carson Beck throws one interception or less, I think Miami covers this spread. And this defense is going to give Julian Sain some problems. I think that could go without saying. But I just think that, like you said, the indoor factor is big. And this Miami offense, at least, will be putting up more than 10 points.
Yeah, I like those. I'm thinking this is in the Music City Bowl. Real good one there. This Tennessee minus 2.5 over Illinois. This game will be on December 30th. It's Tuesday, 5:30. Um, I just think, Tennessee, it seems like every year they're playing in a bowl game and that just gets them to 10 wins under Heupel. So I think they'll get that 10th win of the season and they'll beat an Illinois team that, I've heard about a little bit this year, but I think they've got some transfers and stuff. So I think Tennessee will take care of business, even though I think they're going to be missing their biggest receiver. What was his name? Brazel or something like that. I think he's getting ready
Mm,
for the draft. But I think, you just look back at recent memory, it always seems like Tennessee's playing a Big Ten team in a bowl game, and their offense is just too much for those not as great Big Ten offenses to keep up, so I'll take Tennessee there. And then also Vanderbilt, this will be in the ReliaQuest Bowl on New Year's Eve at noon. I got Vanderbilt minus 4.5 over Iowa. Pavia and the guys, they want one more shot to show everybody that they've been one of the better teams in the nation this year. I know there's been a million times people have said, like, oh, they want to go play at a neutral site against somebody. Well, this is their chance to do it and prove what they want to prove. So I think Pavia with a big day, and this is another case where it's an SEC team versus Big Ten, where the SEC offense is just a little bit too much for those teams that rely a lot on defense. So I think Vandy takes care of business there.
I like it. I agree with both of those. And with that, we appreciate everyone watching. If you're traveling down to New Orleans for the Sugar Bowl, stay safe. If we don't see you by the time Georgia does or doesn't advance and you're traveling to Phoenix, then stay safe with that. We appreciate everyone watching. Make sure to subscribe and like if you haven't already. Comment your score prediction for the Sugar Bowl and who you think the national championship winner is going to be this year. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, everyone, and we appreciate y'all watching.